Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Atlantic Bushcraft Adventures. Tonight we are on episode 210. And before I finish off there, happy anniversary, Ben! We've been at this
Yeah,
for 4 years, but actually the 13th was the official first day. And I just noticed that a few minutes before we started, and I want to make a point of saying that. So we have officially been at this for over 4 years now. Nope,
that is
3 years?
crazy.
4 years.
Yeah,
2019,
four years.
20, 21, 20. Yeah, yeah, we've been at this over 4 years. So 210 episodes over 4 years. Quite the exciting thing. But anyway, tonight, episode 210, and we are talking about kind of defining the differences in the types of camping. And this was an idea you had, Ben. I loved the idea, but why don't you tell us, why don't you lead us in?
Well, I guess sort of where it came from is sometimes you go to somewhere and you're talking to someone and they say, "Oh, what are you into?" And you say, "Oh, I love to go camping," and then they immediately assume that their type of camping and your type of camping is the same thing. And I'm sure you've come across this where someone explains what they do for camping and you're like, "Yeah, that's not what I do," right?
Oh, yeah.
And sometimes it's an issue. Like I'll tell someone, "Oh, I'm really into camping." Oh, we should camp sometime. Let's go. Oh, yeah, cool. Let's go. And I show up with my pack and they're like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "I'm going camping." Like there's a river way in the woods. I'm finding it. And they're like, "Yeah, no. And they have like an RV and they can't even get off pavement. And they consider it the same. And all are valid forms of camping. Don't get me wrong, but um, they're all different types. And I mean, I just quickly, as we were starting here, jotted down a bunch of ways that we have camped in the past few years, and I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 solid, distinct types of camping wrote down.
Okay. Yeah, and that's kind of what I liked this topic. Same idea. The other thought I had about this is when you're trying to research something that's specific to your style of camping. You know what I mean? Like, be it if you are an overlander or you're an RV camper or tent camper, bushcrafter, naturalist, whatever the case may be. If you're looking for something in your niche, if you're not really sure what your niche is, it's awful hard to find information on it. You know what I mean? Like, if you're looking for the best ways to hang a hammock and you're just searching for RV camping, it's not going to work. And I mean, that's two extremes, don't get me wrong, but same kind of, you know what I mean? Same kind of thought process I'm going with here.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So there's a few ways to break this down, but I think the absolute way I would start with is kind of like self-powered and and assisted. And when I break it down to that level, I mean, I know it seems like a weird thing. So self-powered, you're generally going to be looking for lighter weight gear, and you're generally going to be going maybe where the average person won't go. Like you can't do it with a vehicle. You can't do it with, you know. So when I'm talking about that, I would include things like bicycles, hiking, kayaks, canoes, anything that's considered ultralight. And in these cases, you're going to be using your tent, your hammock, maybe a tarp as shelter. Not that you can't use these in the other type, but it's just to give you an idea. So you're looking at lightweight gear going back, and that's one thing. And with all these, you can do a single day trip or a multi-day trip, like a single night versus multi-night. But you have to take into these in consideration. And then there's what I would consider like powered or assisted. And that's when you go with like your motorcycle, maybe with a trailer attached, your car, an RV, you got a big trailer or something along those lines, or maybe a full-size boat where you can sleep in the boat or sailboat, things like that. You can go up to the coast. You can carry a lot more gear. You have a lot more luxury potentially. Maybe you have enough power to run things like refrigerators and large gas stoves. So is it camping? 100% it's still camping, just not the same as somebody who's going out and doing something with the lighter weight, more efficient gear.
So, quick question from the comments, and I might be able to answer this, but I'll leave it to you. Chris Lovelace, are these going to have categories, Ben, or are you just going to be grouping them? And I think you already kind of started to answer that question as you went into the explanation, but just because the question's there, you want to give a formal answer to that? Shelter, camping, tarp, bushcraft. Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it's going to have a hierarchy. Like you're going to split it. So the very first thing, like I said, I had to figure out how am I going to group these out, and I wanted to kind of get it down to sort of. There's always exceptions within these rules, but what are the two major ones? And one is like I said, powered, and that's where you're going to have some bigger things. You're going to be, your primary means to get there would be a vehicle, and then sort of like the self-powered ones. But yes, once you get down there, it does break down because you get very primitive ones and then very modern ones. Um, this could be a very long conversation. I think we want to keep this somewhat reasonable and high level. We won't be able to capture 100% of everything on this, but we should be able to give some people an idea of the different types of camping that are involved. Um,
So yeah, I think starting off, as Ben said, we'll have our two main categories. There'll be the assisted and the self-powered, and then we'll kind of group down from there. I think, Chris. And as Ben said, man, this could be a long topic because we're just giving the broad stroke of the brush here to try and catch as many people as we can in this. The reality is there are so many subcategories or subgroups or whatever you want to talk about that you could split this off into. It would look like a root system from Evergreen Forest. You know what I mean? But we're going to try and keep it a little broader. And if people want the information to break something down further than that, just reach out to us. But I think for the purposes of a podcast and our time constraints and stuff like that, and once again, hitting the bigger group of people as we can, we'll try and keep it a little bit broad, Chris, if that's all good, bud.
we can always expand on one of these topics in a later episode. That's definitely a possibility. So let's just quickly, because I don't want to spend a ton of time on like the assisted one.
Yeah, and that's a good place to start.
It's a really popular segment right now, and the big one we hear right now is the overlanding, and this is the guys that equip vehicles to go on longer trips, where they depend a lot on their vehicle and the setup. So a lot of it is centered around the vehicle, the type of tires they use, how they built like a whole kitchen and a bed within the system, their rooftop tents, or very rugged trailers they can tow in. And I mean, if you listen to these overlanders, some of them will tell you can overland with almost any vehicle. It's just know your limits with that particular vehicle. But it's a really interesting segment, and I think it's a spot if that's what you're interested in. If you really want to have the security of the vehicle and to be able to cover large distances and back some really interesting trails and see stuff that many people will never see, it's a really good option.
No, I was just going to say a prime example of overlanding. Just 2 episodes ago, we had Danny on here. Danny from Red Sand Adventures is joining us in the comments over here as well. Perfect example of overlanding. Lone Wolf 902, he does some overlanding as well. They got vehicles that are tailored to their needs, what they wanted to see in it, but they can take their vehicles, drive a long distance, and still sleep or stay, survive, whatever you want to call it, within the vehicle. What, dear?
What are you doing? Oh, you're seeing in your TV.
Yep. All right, you go off to bed.
Oh.
So, and I would consider some of the more rugged stuff that some people do. And I watch videos where guys took chainsaws to cut the trail in because like the trees had fallen across these backwoods roads, BMR roads in the States and stuff. So, it's definitely more rugged version of that. The more tame version, if it were, are the people pulling bigger normal campers, ones that you would find at the average RV place, and just going to regular parks. It's still camping. And it's not bad for the environment. There's a ton of good things for it. You go to a place, there's a set spot set up. You're not damaging the environment. It's designed for that. There's a lot of resources there. You can have services, electricity, sewer, all these things are potentially there. There's usually good beaches. There's things for the kids to do. Still technically camping. Nothing wrong with it. I've done it for years. I enjoy it still. Just a lot less lately. I really like the backwoods stuff, right?
And the reality, even with the parks and stuff like that, if you want to practice some primitive skills, you still have the full ability to be able to do it there. Camping parks, prime example, as Ben was talking about here. If you want to light your fire, bring your bow drill. You can
Yeah.
practice some of those things. You can practice doing feather sticks to light your fire. You can still work on a lot of your primitive skills, even working from a camping park. So we got Rick, or Time to Explore, joining us in the comments, asking what overlanding is. We kind of gave a real brief overview of what it is, but Rick, the simplest way to sum it up, and unfortunately we have a lot to cover, so it's going to be brief. It's you're tailoring your vehicle to your adventures. So in Danny's instance here, he's doing a lot of adventuring on PEI there. His vehicle is tailored to what he wants to do while he's on the island. So, for instance, he has the the cap on back where he's put a sleeper into it and some electronics, and he's going to put in some sort of heat source, and he's got a cooktop and some other stuff that he tailored into it. Jeremy, on the other hand, kind of a similar setup, but he has a Toyota, I think. He also had a Blazer that he had done up too, but it was a little different project. But same kind of deal. He actually ended up putting a wood stove in it and a few other things. So it's kind of like some of the comforts of a camper, but it's just kind of thrown into your vehicle. Poor man's camper. Poor man's camper that can go through the woods.
Right. And generally, these guys are going on the more out of the way roads, the backwoods roads, the Forest Service roads, and they're really getting to see some interesting things. Some of them travel clean across the country, taking the more rugged routes. Oftentimes, it's really cool. It's worth looking into. It's not necessarily me and Robert's cup of tea per se, but we do. I'm sure you watch some of it. We get ideas from it, and they use some of the same stuff we do. Like some of these guys are using tents and hammocks still, right? They're not necessarily sleeping in the vehicle. They will use a lot of the same things. And this is the thing, every camping thing, there's crossovers that you can use. They're still using some of the same gear. They still use oftentimes lightweight, low bulk gear so they can carry more stuff with them. It's just overall, they're probably not limiting their gear to say less than 50 pounds. They're probably still carrying 5, 6, maybe 1,000 pounds of gear. But they're seeing some really cool things. I seen one a little while ago. They did Cape Breton. It was awesome. And sometimes they do them in convoys, like 15 guys in 7, 8, 10 vehicles. So it's kind of cool.
So on the same note, and because we're down this rabbit hole, there's also something that I included on my list, which is called glamping, which is glamorous camping. And it's kind of a subgenre. I hope I don't offend the Overlander guys with this, but it's kind of like a subgenre of that where you're not so adventurous. You're still kind of taking your vehicle. Generally, you're going to hit the camping parks and stuff like that. But in your vehicle, you're taking a lot more of your niceties. You're probably going to have, like a camp kitchen. You're going to have, if there's no facilities on site, you're probably going to bring like a portable shower, stuff like that. That's what we would consider glamping. You're bringing us a lot of niceties, and it's really nice. Don't get me wrong. It's a lot of fun. It's not for everybody. You know what I mean? A lot of people turn their nose up at it and be like, oh, that's not real camping. You're not getting out there in the dirt. And as far as I'm concerned, as long as you're getting out there and you're having some fun, still awesome. The reason I don't go glamping is because I can't afford to go glamping, which is pretty much the same reason I don't go overlanding, because you do kind of have to tailor a vehicle to that to some degree. It's the same reason I don't own a camper or an RV. If I owned a camper or an RV, I can guarantee you I would be a lot heavier into that. But there's a price tag involved on those, as well as when you're going out camping to camping parks and things like that. You generally have to pay site fees. Bigger RVs and tow-behind campers, they're not as easy to get up old woods roads and stuff like that, though you still can. Don't misunderstand. It's still possible. It's just generally not as easy. So with like big tow-behind campers, especially fifth wheels, and bigger RVs, you're definitely going to be hitting the camping parks, or, as I shudder, a lot of those like seasonal trailer park places, which that's kind of where I draw the line. My own personal thing here. If your camper, RV, or whatever is parked for, say, 6 months of the year in one spot, to me, you're no longer camping, you're cottaging. It's just a mobile cottage. But still awesome to get out there and do something. Don't misunderstand. Still fun. Just doesn't necessarily fall into this, and hopefully I don't offend anybody with that.
In my opinion, and this might be a little controversial, with people who have like the 6 month, like the seasonal campsites, it's oftentimes a little bit about the social, getting together with a whole bunch of friends and going to that one venue. We look at camping as exploring new venues all the time, and preferably places that not a lot of people have been to. But it's all on the spectrum. I mean, the glamping, same thing. You can go to the parks and you can rent the yurts and the authentics and all these cool things. I mean, these are still camping. They're cool ideas, and it's the more traditional. I can say traditional. Kind of traditional. I'm trying to think of the right word, but it's where a lot of people kind of get their start to it, right? If
Yeah, I'm
you're
trying to
not
think of the word that you're. I know what you mean. There is a word to describe that, and I can't think of it. It's more of the broad canvas for a lot of people starting out because it's easily accessible, and you don't have to get into it that deeply. It's pretty. Sorry, go ahead.
it's definitely more the stereotypical camping.
There
It's
you
the
go.
one that
That's
people
better.
picture when you're looking for camping. So if you talk to someone who really doesn't know much about camping and you mention that you go camping, um, and I deal with it a lot nowadays because a lot of people I know have never really been camping, so they go on TV and they watch what was on news and stuff, and they say, "Oh well, we'll go to this campsite, got like a fire pit and all that. It'd be really cool." And it's yeah, but it has more rules and regulations and stuff, and I don't like it.
I'm just reading some of the comments there. So while I'm on there, so we have Chris Levis not to be against, but it seems like the older campers and bushcrafters are snobby about the camping that you do, and unfortunately, you find that in a lot of different sectors, not just the camping community.
Yeah.
Some people are set in their ways, and for whatever reason, tends to be the older folks, like our age and up. So like your 40s, 50s, 60s. Those people tend to they've experienced a good deal of their life and they know what they like is what the reality is, and they're a little hard set on it. Then we have Chris Jones. He was a ground camper all his life until 6 years ago. His cousins gave him an older pop-up camper. And for a lot of people, that's where they start with camper camping. They get pop-ups. They're a little easier to get around. Maybe not quite as comfortable as like the big hard campers. A little bit more upkeep and stuff, but the cost is usually what most people enjoy with those. And a lot of the repairs you can do yourself if you're fairly knacky.
Oh, I think I had one for years.
And then Chris Jones, I still enjoy grabbing a pack full of stuff and heading out. It's just so much easier to get the family to go with the pop-up, which is another big thing with assisted camping. It's way easier to take groups. And by groups, I mean like yourself, your spouse, your kids, maybe extended family. Not that you can't take your extended family or other people out into the woods, but we did an entire episode on trying to get group camping, like coordinate that, and there's a lot to it. Somebody always generally throws a wrench into the works, and it kind of can potentially derail fast.
Well, and the thing to keep in mind anytime you go camping is you really have to cater to, and pardon this expression, the weakest link. And so if you have somebody who's really not going to be comfortable hiking 3 or 4 kilometers or 10 kilometers or 20 kilometers into the woods, or kayaking or canoeing for a whole day, and then setting up a tent and sleeping on the ground, then that person will make everyone else absolutely miserable because they won't be happy. And it doesn't mean they have a bad attitude. Don't get me wrong. I'm not picking on that individual. But if they're not comfortable, they're not going to be, bright and sunshine, and they're going to be stressed. And some people just can't handle that. So if they're not into it and you want to go with people who aren't into it, you kind of have to cater to those people. We've covered this in other episodes. Like if you're trying to get your significant other who's not into it, start them off slow. Don't bring them back to, don't do Liberty Lake Loop on the first trip. Right?
No, and it's true. And that's where like the assisted camping kind of comes in. Assisted camping, it gives a sense of security and home when you're in the woods, or it can, I should say. If somebody has a bad night, I'll reference like when we did the ABA gathering, which was us and Steve. My hammock system failed, and I was able to bail into my car. And the hammock system failed because of me. It was still a fine hammock. Long story short, but you can go find it in other podcasts. We covered that. But I had that ability that I was just like, oh, you know what? It's middle of the night. I'm not going to fix this. I'm just going to go lay in the car. You know what I mean? Crashed in the car. Slept great. And that's the safety net that you kind of have when you have assisted camping. Even if it's just your car or something there, if somebody gets spooked by something they hear in the woods, which is common for new people going out there, I mean, we've talked about this too, it's creepy. It can be very creepy. If they just don't feel as comfortable, if they get cold, if they find the ground a little too hard, or they don't like their hammock or something like that, you always have that anchor point, that security, that safety zone, you know what I mean? And that's kind of the real big draw to assisted camping. And if you have an RV or something like that, well, you're already inside. You're basically toting around a camper. You're already inside, potentially has heat, maybe a toilet. Like, there's a lot of niceties that come with this.
Some of these RVs are nicer than my apartment. Don't get me wrong. So, but it's the whole spectrum. And as we go down the spectrum, so like I said, if you start at the most luxurious, full featured, you got your big fifth wheels, your big tow behinds, and your actual class 5 RVs. And that's where you're going to probably have, you know, satellite radio, 2 or 3 big screen TVs, a full dishwasher, you know, you got it all. It's all there. You know, big lazy boy chair. And then as you come down, you get the smaller and cheaper trailers or more affordable trailers. And then you can get to your rugged trailers, the ones that, like a lot of your pop-ups, some of them have bigger wheels, some of them are designed to go in harder to reach places. You can get the teardrop ones that are designed for the really, all it is a bed spot with a kitchen that's still technically outside, right?
And those are my dream, honestly. If I'm going to buy a camper, that's what I want. I like the outdoorsy thing. I'm fat and old, and I'm starting to dislike sleeping on the ground. I love hammock camping, but I have sleep apnea as well, so when I get on my back, sometimes I stop breathing or I snore. So,
I mean, it is. I think it's all a spectrum. When you get to the total opposite end, and we'll get to that eventually, but you get to the ultralight guy who goes in with like half a toothbrush, a razor blade, and some tin foil, and he's good for a week. You know, and so there's that end too, and we don't end up on either end of the spectrum. We're much closer to the center than either of the extreme ends by far.
And the beauty with all of this is you don't have to stay in one place on that spectrum. This weekend, maybe you're taking your RV out, and at the end of the month, you're going out with, you know, your pocket knife, and you're going to stay overnight and see how it works out. That's the beauty of being outside, bushcrafting, camping, whatever you want to call it in general. You can do what you want.
I've done everything but the absolute most extremes of these, and I can't say that any one of them I hated. I enjoyed it. For years, we had a pop-up camper. We have a cabin, which is still somewhere on that spectrum. It's probably much closer to the RV one, but again, I don't have the dishwasher, and I have to hook up my own pump, and there's work to it. But I enjoy it and love it. Gets you out there. That's the big thing. But how many ways are there to get out there? There's dozens, and my list keeps growing as we go through this. The one that I think I would like to bring together, because I'd like to keep this moving, because I know you have a time limit tonight.
Yep.
And what we have done on this show, bike camping, motorcycle camping, right? And that's the lower end of the assisted ones. So me and you took motorcycles, and we took street bikes, not designed for dirt roads.
Not at all. And if anybody wants to see some of that, we did a response video at the end of it, sitting in front of the bikes, and you can kind of see where we were and the bikes we used, and it was nerve-wracking going up there with all that shale. I was like, yeah, this is how I lose a set of tires.
So, yeah, we both got back there, and like the ruts were horrible. It was hard to get the bikes in and out of them, but we had a grand old time, and we got in there, and then we walked for a couple of kilometers afterwards and just left the bikes randomly in the woods and hoped nobody would steal them. And they didn't.
Nobody would get back there to get them anyway.
But you know, that's something else. So anything you can use to assist yourself getting back to, but a lot of the gear is interchangeable. So we'll talk a little bit. We've often talked about the gear. We don't have to go in great detail, but we can talk about that as we go. When you flip from that, then you get the things like bicycles, canoes, kayaks, and stuff like that. And, you know, those are great. We love those. We take our kayaks and canoes. You've recently got into canoeing. You've always been interested in it. You've gone with me a few times. So there's some great advantages to those two, because you can take a little bit more gear, similar to your assisted, but you're still limited with your space and room. And if you have to do a portage, you probably do want to kind of keep that stuff to a minimum, because you have to now carry a canoe.
The less assistance you have, the less gear you want to take with you. Not all the time, but ideally.
So yeah, so there's sort of that. Um, and then you get to the sort of like total complete other end of the spectrum, and that's when you have to hike it back. Um, and even with that, you have like you know, your through hikers, like the PCT and the Appalachian Trail. These are guys that walk what 7,000 kilometers, 5,000 kilometers, or something over 6 months. That's an extreme end of it. Something I would love to try, but I got the feeling if I turned this to my family and said, "Come on, we're taking 6 months and we're going to walk across the entire length of the Americas," then somebody's going to laugh at me, and I'm going by myself.
I was about to say, family becomes a luxury word.
Yeah, so you're now single from that, and by single I mean walking single. That's it for the next 6 months.
Hope you have a sat phone. But yeah, and I guess the other and well, no, still kind of staying on to this end of it. The last one I had for assisted is something that I've gotten into in the last little bit. I take my ATV. I take
Yes.
the stuff I would normally take from going hiking. Though I can take a little bit more. If anybody looked at the adventures that I did last year with Melissa, we had the inflatable raft with us, which is just kind of a dinghy, and I had a little electric trolling motor and a battery on it. And that can all be packed onto the ATV plus our kit bags, which gave us the ability to take a little more. And, you know, not to beat a dead horse, but that's what the assisted camping's all about. It gives you the ability to potentially take more. You don't have to, but you have something helping you. When I was younger, in my teenage years, I used to take my grandfather's horses. And you'd throw the saddle on that, throw a pack bag on it, and you'd disappear for the weekend. You know what I mean? And that was a lot of fun, too.
I have always wanted to do that.
It is amazing, Ben. If you ever make it back over here, I'll arrange some horses for us. I still have connections.
What?
Oh, yeah, man.
How did I not know about this?
You never asked.
That's it.
So,
Come
okay,
on, this fall.
real
I'm
short
figuring-
story. Melissa used to work on a horse ranch up in Windsor, doing trail rides. And all of our pre-existing horses, both my family's and my grandparents, went to a place in Antigonish. So I still have connections down there. The horses are now long past, but I still kept the connections down there, and they still have horses. And I'm sure I could get the loan of one for a weekend or two, more specifically.
Two of us are not going on one boat.
No,
that is not fair.
that horse is not going to like all that gear and weight on it. I can tell you that. And that gets way too snuggly after 4 hours of riding.
No, it's a date, buddy. That's it. You got a mandate.
Dude is a legend. I follow a guy who camps with goats. And funny enough, even a pack mule, pack goat, all that stuff, that's assisted camping. So anything that assists you in taking your gear is kind of where this falls out. AT is 2,200 miles. Okay. I think I'm trying to keep up to the comments. There is a lot over there. So keep on rolling there, Ben. You have a nice timeline, and I'll follow suit.
No, I think we covered a lot of them. So let's just overall, let's summarize a little bit because we're already at the 30-minute mark. The big thing to remember, camping is anything that gets you into the woods for an overnight trip. That's my basic, most limited thing. What encompasses a woods or wilderness? We can even get rid of the woods. We can say anything gets you into wilderness outside of the city for an overnight qualifies in my book as camping. How can you do that? It varies a lot of ways. But like we said, we can take vehicles. We didn't talk about boats, but people do this. There's a ton of sailing videos where people sail around the world. They are, in a lot of ways, camping.
It's camping on the water, as far as I'm concerned. I know it's boating, don't get me wrong, but same thing. You're just traveling on the ocean.
Right? And a lot of them will pull into a harbor and they'll stay along one beach for 2 or 3 days. They'll fish. They do everything right from the vehicle. It's no different than overlanding, except on water. And I think so. It's not overlanding.
I love that analogy. It's water. It's overwatering, not overlanding.
And I'm fascinated by it. Like I've been looking at this for years, and the sad thing is, it's surprising how cheap a sailboat can be if you're willing to do a little bit of work. So,
Don't laugh at that, Danny. I'm coining overwatering.
Overwater. We're going to become the new overwaterers.
Oh, anyway, you know what else? I'm going to consider this assisted because it falls into your campers and cabins and stuff like that. Recently, once again last year, Melissa and I stayed at what's called the Domes. And if anybody's from Nova Scotia, it's called, I think it's the West River Domes. And literally, this is out in the middle of nowhere. And it is, I think it's West River. I'd have to look it up now. But anyway, it's out in the middle of nowhere. We drove there. I took the ATV. There's ATV trails there, and we hit those. Just wrecked my tires. But anyway, that's another story. But that is, to me, that is kind of a type of camping. I did bring my axe. We had to prepare some of our own firewood for an outside fire. We had a hot tub, which is kind of, the extreme of glamping. But it was a lot of fun. And it was a new experience, and it was something where I could practice some of the primitive skills. But I had that nicety that at night we had a bed, we had a little bit of power, we had, a type of toilet, so you weren't squatting in the woods, basically. It's still a lot of fun and very acceptable in my book.
Yeah. So, and I think the big thing is don't be the camping snob. And I am a bit of a camping snob. I will admit this. When somebody comes to me and some people say, I want to go camping with you, Ben. And then they say, let's go to this provincial park or this private park. And immediately my heart goes like, no, because I'm no longer happy with that. Like, that's not where I want to be. That is something I will do. It's an event that I will do. And it's good. It's fine. It's enjoyable. But my heart, I want to be somewhere I don't want as many people around me. I want a little bit more privacy. I want to be somewhere where I can kind of be myself and have a fire where I want, hook up my hammock where I want. I don't want a warden coming by or a park official come by and say, Ben, you can't be there. You can't talk to those people. And they've done this to me. Like, I have been told to leave parks. I've been told you're too friendly, you're talking to too many people, get back to your site, shut up.
But you know what? That's the beauty of doing some of those things. And I know we're kind of dwelling on this one a little bit, but that is another benefit to the assisted camping. You do have that social aspect of it. Generally, when you're doing non-assisted camping or you're, hiking into the woods, you're going to be by yourself. It's very rare that you're going to stumble upon someone else. Though it's not impossible, it's rare. But if you go to a camping park, there's other campers. You can do the social thing. You can walk around, talk to people, learn a little bit about them, engage with your fellow humans.
Oh, man. I remember camping. My father, we did a lot. We always had a pop-up camper, or often had a pop-up camper. And we would go and, by the time we had woke up, Dad had already gotten up. He'd used the washroom. He'd start walking around. If there was somebody else out, getting their campfire going or getting a Coleman stove going and getting a cup of coffee going, Dad wandered in and have a chat with the guy. By the time he was done, he knew where he was from. He knew about his kids, his family, what his favorite type of coffee was, if he drank, if he smoked, if he did this. He knew everything about the guy. And Mom would get kind of frustrated with him. I remember his head. It's not even 8 o'clock. You only know it's 25 people in the park.
So just because it was a unique experience, it was actually Wallace River Domes or Wallace River Ranch. And anybody that doesn't know what I'm talking about, just real quickly, if I can make this work. Nah, it ain't going to work for me. I'll come back to that. But anyway, it's literally just pop-up domes. I'll get a picture for you here in a second, and I'll just throw it up while we're talking. But yeah, the social aspect. That's the best part of it. With the domes, I didn't have that because we were the only ones there. We got it before the season opened. We were literally one of the first people to stay there. It was an amazing experience. But anyway, you do have that social aspect. We got to meet the owners and stuff like that. And like you said, if you are a chatty type of person, that is the type of outing you should be going looking for. You can have a ton of fun.
Sort of one other thing that we didn't mention is rented cabins, because you can rent cabins in the woods. Irwin Lakes is one I stayed there in Truro, but there was also, we rented, I can't remember the name, but it was tree houses in New Brunswick. It was in a park, but you could go there and they had like 5 or 6 tree houses you could rent. There's all kinds of neat things that get you kind of out there, and you can have some pretty unique experiences in the outdoors. And I'd still list them all as camping. Just, you know, differences. And I think it's important to at least give each type a try if you can. You know, some people cannot get in a boat, so they're not going to go canoeing, kayaking. They're afraid of water, or it's too difficult to get in and out. They're not physically in a shape to do it. That's fine. Do what you can. Always stay within your limits. Keep that in mind. Never push yourself to the point where you can't. And I think that's a safety thing we've often explored. If you're going to try something new and you're not sure you can do it, test that idea out in the safest way you can. With tents, hammocks, a lot of this, even your camper, test it in your driveway if you can. Right?
Yeah.
Right now I'm in a situation I couldn't do that, so I would have to go a little bit out.
Couldn't, or scared of what people would say about you, Ben, if you started camping in a parking lot.
Oh, I truly believe right now, like my vehicle's parked in underground garage, and there is no like communal place that I can park except like literally on the side of the road. I think if you try to sleep there, the police would root you out within a few hours. Like, it's just not the way.
So there's a couple comments coming up here, and I wanted to make a few comments on them on my own. So just to catch everybody up. So Danny, just a spot recently opened up that rents them. He was talking about domes there. Looks like a nice place to relax. Chris Loveless, you guys are lucky in Canada. In the States, it's hard to find good camping. I have to currently drive 2 hours in any direction to find a good camp. I could camp on, Crown land basically for us here in Canada, or I'm trying to think what the equivalent is in everywhere else. Basically government-owned land. But the desert sucks for camping. Then Danny said, Chris, if I drive 2 hours in any direction, he'd be in the ocean. If anybody doesn't know, PEI is a relatively small province. I think it's 3 hours tip to tip. Like, you can be on the furthest side on the east and drive 3 hours, and you'll be on the farthest tip on the west kind of deal. Chris, this is Rick here. I can be at a lakeside in 30 minutes in any direction. And then they're kind of making fun there. But this is the funny part. This is the comment I wanted to make, because we do have listeners that are from, like, Europe and a lot of the European places. In 2 hours, they've cost, like, 3 countries. You know what I mean? So it's all in perspective. In some parts of Canada, you can drive for 2 hours and not be to the end of your driveway. So
I was thinking, where I grew up, one direction, yeah, you'd cross a couple of communities in 2 hours. 3 probably, like, clearly. But there's other directions. You drive 2 hours, you're still in the middle of nowhere. Like, you have not gotten anywhere.
Well, Ontario, prime example. Like, it's more than half that province is uninhabited. Like, you can get there. It's forest. You know what I mean? Just nobody really lives there. And you can go for hours and hours and hours and hours, and you're still in the woods. Bureau of Land Management in the States. Yeah, that's what it is in the States, but I don't know what the European equivalent is. Maybe it's the same thing, but government land is basically what I was getting at, Chris. Land that's owned by the state or the province or the country or whatever that you're currently residing in. It's not owned by individuals. But anyway, slightly off topic there. So yeah, that's kind of the assisted camping side of things. Seeing we're coming up on 40 minutes. You want to start diving down the other rabbit hole, or?
I think we covered a little bit. We often do, but so then, like we said, there's the hiking, the canoeing, the camping, and the ultralight, which falls into hiking, but it's a bit different. And this is where, like, the gear you're carrying, you're literally carrying it. Like, there's no doubt about it. And this is what we concentrate a bit more on. Now, we've touched on these other things, but I would like to talk a little bit about it. And this is where you really start to think about what you're taking. And that's the big difference between the other ones. Yes, you can't take everything in the kitchen sink because you are camping. You're roughing it to some degree. But as you get less and less assistance, like you said, you really have to start thinking about everything, to the point where ultralights, they think about, does it need a tag? Does it need a label on it? Can I take the decals off because they weigh something?
Grams matter. Like, literal grams of things matter. And
the strings under their pack, if it's 2 inches longer than they need it, they'll cut the 2 inches off because I don't need those full 2 inches of rope. if there's leather straps to close the button, and I don't think they'd use leather, they would find a lighter material to replace it with, type deal, right? Like they really are. Generally, their packs, some of their packs are named things like Glossamer.
And I can hear some people out there, without them saying it, saying, well, that seems very extreme, Ben. But the reality is, they're the ones that are hitting like the Appalachian Trail and stuff. Grams add up over distance. So if you're counting calories and you're trying to figure out how much food you need, if you take, say you shaved off 2 pounds by taking all these tags off, the strings off, all the things you don't necessarily need, 2 pounds over like a 6-month walking, that's a lot of calories you have saved, believe it or not.
Yeah. The argument they say is it's equivalent to saving tons, because like every pound you carry for so far is a like you say, is a calorie of a thing. So you work it out. It's like saving yourselves tons of weight that you didn't have to lug over those distances, and it makes a huge difference. But it's really neat too, because what they're getting at is, what do I absolutely need? What is the minimum I need? And you have another group of people, and this is like your ultimate, kind of where I kind of want to be, but I'm not quite there yet, is the ultimate survivalist who says, like, I can go in there with a pocket knife and make everything I need and survive on the bare necessities, the food that exists. Where like a lot of ultralight guys are very much into the leave no trace, take nothing, leave nothing, right? So everything they carry in, they carry out. Everything they carry in, they either consume. Some of them to the point where they even carry out their waste to like they don't even want to bury it because they feel that's. And I hear there's camping areas where you're not allowed to leave your waste. You can't pack that out in a bag.
And for anybody that's wondering, waste is everything. Human byproducts, your orange peeling. Literally, if it went in with you, it comes out with you.
With you. Yeah, there's no exception. And so these guys, I mean, they pride themselves in the fact that they leave virtually nothing but maybe a footprint. And even then, some of them are. But these are the guys that'll look at their footwear and they're carrying like lightweight sneakers and they're carrying like everything. And the argument they have is they're able to cover much more distance easily than somebody carrying a 25, 30-pound pack and heavy gear and stuff shoved in their pockets. Like some of these guys, their average weight, including food, is 15 pounds or less. And there's super ultralight guys that are like under 7 pounds and stuff. Like they would.
And like Chris and Danny are saying here, you have to admire those guys. Like it takes a certain amount of tenacity. I will openly admit, I envy that kind of camping. It's very unlikely I would go down the path of that kind of camping. A light pack for me, no joke, folks, is 40 pounds. That's a light pack for me. Average pack, 50. Easy.
Yeah. Well, we've weighed it. We tried it. We sat there one day and put in what we wanted to take, and we sat there and looked at each other, and the end result was, well, I could go lighter. Like I could leave the chair. I could leave this. I could leave that. But I like my comfort a little bit too much. And
that's the thing. You have to weigh what you enjoy with what you're going out there to do. And that's, once again, full circle. That's what makes all of this so great. There is a style for everybody. If you have mobility issues, that's not an excuse. You know what I mean? You can get out there. There's people at the Bushcraft gathering. People in wheelchairs and stuff like that. They're still out there enjoying the woods because they just tailored how they get out there. You know what I mean? They got an accessible vehicle. They do a little bit more of like overlanding or park camping, but that doesn't mean that they don't still go into the woods. They find ways. It's literally for everybody of all walks of life, creeds, genders, you name it. Dirt bike tires on a wheelchair. I think it was more like pedal bike tire. Like they had some grip on them. It was kind of neat.
Yeah. But, and, you know, you really can't judge anyone who does this, like, financially either, because these ultralight guys, some people, maybe they're just too cheap, but I mean, some of these guys spend like $400 and $500 on their bag.
Massive amounts of money.
Their tarps, like I know I've spent a little over $150, $160 on a tarp, and I thought that was bad. Then I was in the store the other day, and I looked at an ultralight backpacking tarp, and it's not even that big. And the thing was well over $300. I was like, holy cow!
Well, look at an ultralight down sleeping bag.
Yeah,
You could be into $1,000 easy.
right? And it's down to the material. Like they'll buy the highest fill power with the like most, and they have to be really careful with their gear. Like when you buy gear on this end, it's to be that light and to be that good. It's not only is it usually really expensive, it's pretty fragile. Like it has
That's
strong.
the other thing I would love to own overlanding gear. Or not overlanding gear, ultralight gear.
Yeah.
I don't think it's durable enough to withstand me. You know what I mean?
It can withstand the hiking and the camping. It can do that, but then you put like oafs involved because let's admit we are kind of ogreish. Not to offend the ogres.
I am like almost 6 foot. I'm like 5'10", 5'11", somewhere around there. But on a good day, I'm hovering around 300 pounds. Ben, you're over 6 feet. You were heavier in weight, much like I am. You've lost a lot of weight, and good on you for keeping it off. But you're still not a small dude. You know what I mean? So.
No, and let's be honest, we're not the most gentle people.
Oh, hell no. I throw my stuff everywhere. You know what I mean? And it's not because I'm trying to destroy it. It's just how I am. I think I'm being gentle with it, but I could take my backpack down and sometimes instead of just setting it down lightly in the ground, I just sling it over and kind of drop it on the ground. But the reality is if there was rocks there and if you had one of those ultralight tarps or something like that, you could have just poked a hole in it. It takes a certain amount of care to own that stuff. I don't think I'm capable of it.
We don't gingerly walk around a tree. We kind of go through it.
I can hardly go through a door frame without my shoulders hitting. You know what I mean? I don't do well in the woods avoiding trees.
Oh, I stopped wearing watches for years because I used to smash the crystal off them because I kept walking into things. And people say, what do you mean you walked into doors? And I'm like,
smash them off everything. I had to put a plastic cover over my watch. Like, I don't know if you folks can see it, but literally there's like a cover over my watch to keep me from smashing out the frames in them.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it takes certain skills, certain disciplines to do some of this stuff. And so we buy gear that works well with us. I think you really need to understand overall, like we said, what is camping at the most basic level, anything to get you in the woods for an overnight trip. What is the camping for you? That's a totally different question. Figure it out for yourselves. We are more than happy to help you figure it out for yourself. And if you want to try some of the more challenging things, we highly recommend it. We do some of this stuff ourselves. We have talked about the dollar store challenge before. Like take $10, $15. Unfortunately, our dollar stores are frightfully expensive. And the last time I went in there was things in there for $5. So.
Oh man, I went in. What did I go in for? Melissa and Lily went in just the other day. If anybody, I assume most people get March break in their neck of the woods. I honestly don't know. This is ignorance on my part, but it's March break here. So the kids off school, so I took a few days off. We went to the dollar store. We went in with the plan of buying her some stickers. That's it. That's all we went in for was some stickers. Came out with dang near $200 worth of stuff. Like, how do you do that?
Oh man, my family loves the dollar store, and I kind of hate it because I think we spend more money at the dollar store than we do at Costco.
I can't go in the dollar store without coming out bare minimum $50. Bare minimum.
Yeah. So it is what it is. But anyways, we talked about these challenges and stuff. They're fun. They're exciting to do. The end result is, get out there and try these things. There's a lot of ways to camp. We've covered most of them at some high level. Trust me, there's any one of these options you can go into. Any one of these, from overlanding, there's a whole spectrum within overlanding. There's a whole spectrum within trailers and fifth wheelers and in-truck campers. There's a whole spectrum on that. There's ones that are very luxurious and really would stay into like predetermined campgrounds to ones that you can take way back where almost nobody goes, like that people stick on the back of Jeeps and and the new Broncos and Toyota Tacomas, right? Like there's the whole spectrum, and all those are really cool. And then even with the ultralight guys, some people are going fairly easy to do trails, and other people are going like just taking a compass bearing and boom, like orienteering type style, right? But yeah, all these things are really cool.
There was one more thing. It was kind of mentioned in the comments. We talked about it in a past episode, and I know it's going to come up, so I'll bring a little attention to it now. The other thing that falls in campers is the truck bed campers. And we've talked about these before, and I know not everybody knows what they are. What they are is it's essentially a small camper that legitimately just slides into the box of your truck. It's usually on stilts. You back your truck up under it. You lower it down. It sits in the box. I think you still put C-clamps on it or some way of holding it in there, I'm sure. I don't own one. But anyway, you lower it onto the truck, and it generally has a very small living space inside. Usually sticks over the cab of your truck. That's where your bed area would be. And then down on the bottom part that would sit in your box, you would generally have like a small table, a chair, maybe a cooktop or something like that. There's different ones. Once again, they can get very glamorous. They can be very basic, but that would still fall into the camper aspect of things. In my opinion, I do know there is a subgroup, once again, of people that use these for overlanding. The thing is, they tend to be fairly heavy. And when you start banging around on backwoods and you're doing a lot of shifting, I do know the bodies can break apart on them sometime. So you got to do your research there. That's it.
Make sure you have a truck that's capable of doing it. I think there's oftentimes a support bar that goes on either side, and you sort of strap it down to that. It can affect your clearance. It can affect how narrow of a trail you can go down. It also affects the height of your vehicle. It makes it much higher, and it moves your center of gravity. So it's all things to take into consideration. I'm not a super fan of them, but I know a lot of people are and absolutely love them. And
I would love to own one. And there's a picture of one. Like, that's a fairly bougie one. But that's the idea. And you can get these to the high end, to the low end, or everything in between.
Yeah, I think we've covered most of what I wanted to cover, and we're coming awful close to an hour, so...
Yeah, and so we did cover a ton in there, folks. And kind of looping back to Chris's original question, we're going to break these down into categories and stuff like that. Just to reiterate, the reality is you can take any one of those things we talked about, as Ben was saying there. You could take the ultralight, you could take the overlanding, you could take the park camping, you could take the camper cabbing, whatever, and you could break that down into more groups again. You can dive down the rabbit hole as far as you want on any of these broad spectrum topics. You could be the guy that uses a camper, but doesn't sleep in the camper. He exclusively uses hammocks, only uses the camper to bring his... Like, there is so many niches out there.
You can get a hitch to put your hammock into the back of your vehicle, so you're still car camping. You're just sleeping outside of your vehicle, but still attached, right? Yeah, there's the people that got out the inside of SUVs and put like beds in it and stoves in it and turned the whole thing into like a mini RV that's still lightweight enough that they can drive wherever they want. These are all awesome things. If there's a topic you guys would like to hear more about, please feel free to reach out to us and tell us which one you'd really like us to focus on. And we can definitely talk for an hour on any one of these subjects. There is 2 years worth of podcasts right there if we wanted to. No problem. I know I could talk for 2 or 3 episodes just on canoe and kayaks.
So Chris just made a statement of check out a truck house. Those things are pretty cool. It's like a camper and a truck slammed together. Picture like the slide-in camper without the restrictions of the box taking up room. It's pretty cool.
Okay. Yeah. There's so many options. There's so many variations. A lot of people are getting small cube vans. I mean, the van. My grandparents for years had a camper van.
Needed sometimes. Chris Loveless, 2-hour long podcast needed sometimes. And maybe we'll do that sometime. Rick, last thing on there, just on the camper van thing. He said apparently there's a unit you can get that just slides into a van. An instant camper.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, it's a pretty wide out thing there. And and you get into it, people buy the Unimogs, especially out in Europe, surprisingly enough. They have a lot of old military vehicles converted for this stuff. So you can get in any of these things. It's such a broad topic, but it's one that we kind of wanted to touch on this week, and I think we definitely touched on it. And
oh yeah, we definitely did, but it's a good topic. And I keep saying, good topic, good topic, good topic. Reality is there's no bad topics, but it's a good topic just to kind of see where you stand, or at least get an idea of what's out there. Maybe you're new to this and you didn't know all the rabbit holes and where they go. This is a very top-level discussion that can go so deep. And as Ben said, if you want to hear more about something, let us know.
But and a big reason for this is if you think you can't camp, I think there's a method for you. No matter who you are, what your capabilities are, there is a type of camping you can do.
100% guaranteed. And like Ben said, that is the number one takeaway. If you think you're being limited, you're really only being limited by this. Maybe this. Don't get me wrong. I understand that one. But if there's a will, you can find a way.
Anyways, yeah. So as we've always said, but I think this one really highlights that, get out there, have fun.
Play safe, folks. We'll see you next week on Wednesday. However, the week after that, if I'm not mistaken, Ben, yes. Which should be the 29th, just putting it out there now, we will probably not be doing a podcast on the 29th. It will be the 30th. We are going to bring Matthew back on. That was with us last week. We're going to talk a little bit about the history of bushcrafting, provided it all works out. It was a little bit more convenient for him to come on a Thursday night, and where he lives in the U.S., we're in Canada. We tried to tailor around him a little bit because he was good enough to come back. So once again, folks, on the 30th, or in 2 weeks' time, it'll be a Thursday night. Same time, though. Still 9 o'clock, as far as I know. That hasn't changed. It's just going to be a Thursday night. And that one may be a little longer chat, too. We'll do some serious advertising for that. Hopefully, everybody that joined us over here in the comments, you are going to come back every time, preferably, but really try and make it back for that 30th episode. If you never had the chance to watch last week's, definitely give it a listen. Matt knows his stuff. He has a little I shouldn't say little. He has a survival school class there. You can find all his information in the other episode. He's doing some neat stuff, and we'll hear from him again.
Perfect. Yeah, 100%. Okay.
And now we're gonna get ribbed for changing the days, but such is life. All right, folks, have a good night.
Sure, give me more comments. Out there, have fun. See you later, guys.